So let's say you have $1,000 and you want to pick, which account do I put it in? All else being equal, do I put it into a TFSA or an RRSP? Well, that depends on where you are in your career, when you want to access the money, and what you want to use it for. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sean. Hey, if you're new here, on this channel we talk about self-improvement and personal finance, so if you're interested in any of that stuff, please consider subscribing. In the video today, I'm going to be talking about TFSAs, RRSPs, the American counterparts, which are Roth IRAs and traditional IRAs, and I'll explain some of the differences and hopefully give you some clarity on when to use which investment vehicle and why. So I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration later, but I thought it would be good to first talk about what each account does and list some of the differences for you at the start. So first let's talk about a TFSA. So a TFSA can look like many things. It could be a high interest savings account or an investment vehicle like a mutual fund or a portfolio. What it lets you do is grow your money with after-tax dollars, and if that money grows and you get paid interest on it, you will not get taxed on the interest that you earn. So let's say you have a mutual fund that's a TFSA account. You get $1,000 from your job, off your paycheck, you put it $1,000 into this TFSA. After 10 years, it grows to be $2,000 or $3,000. You don't have to pay tax on what you've earned on that investment. This is very similar to a Roth IRA, which is what they call this type of investment vehicle in the States. The difference with a Roth IRA is it's still $6,000 a year that you can contribute to this type of account. When you're over 50, that goes up to $7,000 a year, so you have a little bit extra when you're over 50. One of the big differences or downsides of a Roth IRA is that your contribution room doesn't carry over to the next year. So with a TFSA, if you put in $3,000 one year because that's all you could save, and then you go and put $6,000 the next year, you actually have the $3,000 of room from the previous year. You could put another $3,000 in and put in $9,000 the next year. Let me explain that a little bit differently. So with a TFSA, with $6,000 worth of contribution room per year, if you only put in $3,000 on year one, you can put in $9,000 in year two because that extra $3,000 of room carries over to the next year. This is not the case with a Roth IRA. The other thing with Roth IRAs is you have to be careful with dividends. With a TFSA, dividends are not taxed, but on a Roth IRA, they could be taxed. You just have to look into the details and make sure that whatever you're earning on is not taxed, but just something to pay attention to. So now let's talk a little bit about RRSPs. RRSPs in Canada are more of a tax deferral vehicle. What I mean by that is that you use them to avoid taxes now so that later when you go and take that money out, you pay tax at a lower rate or at a lower bracket. Where a TFSA, you can invest after-tax dollars and collect your investment returns later in the future without penalty, you will have to pay taxes on RRSP gains. The max you can contribute to an RRSP per year is 18% of your total income or $26,500, whichever is less. Similar to TFSAs, there are a lot of different types of accounts that you can open, whether it be a savings account or otherwise, but most likely you'll be putting your money into a mutual fund or some kind of investment vehicle because your plans for an RRSP should be long-term, especially if you're in your 20s and just starting out your career. Now, the differences between this and a traditional IRA, which is the US equivalent, is that with an IRA, you can only put in $6,000 a year. If you're over 50, that goes up to $7,000. Also, there are penalties in a traditional IRA if you withdraw your money before you are 59 and a half. With an RRSP, you will be forced to start withdrawing money out of that account when you reach the age of 71. With an IRA, you will also be forced to withdraw money, but that will be when you're 71 and a half. Now, another thing you may have heard of if you're in the US is a 401k. I'm not gonna get into a 401k, but that vehicle looks a little bit more like what an RRSP is. 401ks can be anywhere from $19,000 to $25,000 a year, but these are provided through your employer, so there are a lot of nuances there when it comes to how to access that money. So I'm not gonna talk too much about that. I'm gonna stick to TFSAs and RRSPs. So we're gonna think of your money in two instances of time. One in its state right now and also in the future. Right now, your money will go to two places. It'll go to the government, represented by Mr. Trudeau here.
Hello.
And it'll also go to the bank in the form of one of these accounts that we're talking about. In the future, you'll also have to consider taxes, so we'll put another picture of Mr. Trudeau here, and the bank where your money will hopefully still be years from now. So this is you on the left.
Hello.
You're excited, you got your job, and your income is going to be represented by these four quarters. So first, we'll talk about the TFSA. Money from your job is again represented by these four quarters. So this could be your monthly salary or whatever. Let's say you go to invest that sum of money. Well, after you earn it, the government's going to want its share. So let's pretend that you are in a tax bracket where you pay 25%. So one quarter goes to the government. The other three quarters we'll put in the TFSA account in the bank. So to represent time moving forward, we're going to move all of this money from its current state now into the future. Now notice that the tax stayed in the now, which is in the past. And in the future, hopefully, and most likely, your investments or those quarters have now grown into something more. So I've represented that growth by these three Canadian loonies. What this represents is the investments that you put away years ago have now matured and gained interest. So now let's see what happens when we use an RRSP. We'll use four quarters again to represent the money that you've earned at your job. Now watch how an RRSP works a little bit differently than the TFSA with the same amount of money. Right now, the government will want to tax you on what you earn. So one quarter goes to Justin, the other three are with the bank. When you file your taxes, the government sees that you've invested in an RRSP vehicle. And when it sees that, it'll return some of that money to you. But for simplicity and for this demonstration, let's just assume that they return the whole quarter back to you. All four quarters could go into the investment. So in the future, those four quarters have now matured and become four loonies. We're gonna take one of these loonies and switch it out for four quarters. In case you don't know, a loonie is worth four quarters. Now in the future, when you withdraw money from this account, the government's still gonna wanna tax you on it. So let's represent that by giving a couple quarters to the government, but now in the future. The idea is if you use this effectively, you're avoiding getting taxed at a higher bracket in the present, and after you've paid off your house, you've brought down your expenses, and you need a smaller amount of money to live when you're retired, you start pulling money out of this RRSP account at a rate that's lower than the salary that you were making before you retired. So we've pulled two quarters out of the right-hand side and given it to the government in the form of taxes. Another thing to think about is, let's say future you now wants to take out everything from your investments. With the TFSA, you can withdraw all the money at once and not pay any taxes on it. Whereas with an RRSP, if you take out all the money, you have to be careful because you could get charged at a much higher tax rate than if you were to take the money out slowly. So we would give the government an extra loonie, let's say in this case. Just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about how you're going to use this money in the future in an RRSP. If you think you will be okay with taking a little bit of money out every month in the future, consider the RRSP. But if you think you're going to take that money out for a big purchase, like let's say you want to buy a vacation home in the future, then I would consider the TFSA. So I hope that demonstration helped you guys out a little bit. So let's say you have $1,000 and you want to pick, which account do I put it in? All else being equal, do I put it into a TFSA or an RRSP? Well, that depends on where you are in your career, when you want to access the money, and what you want to use it for. I would say if you're in the early parts of your career and you haven't really maxed out any of your investment vehicles, I would go for the TFSA first. The reason is that at the start of your career, you're making less money, so you're not really deferring a lot of tax. Any money you would put in an RRSP in your 20s, you might end up withdrawing that money when you're retired, but you might be withdrawing similar to what you're making when you're in your 20s. So you've deferred that tax to a later date, but as you know, with inflation, if you take out the same amount of money and you're in the same tax bracket later on, you're not that much further ahead. So first I would focus on a TFSA. Now, if you're a little bit later in your career and you're in a higher tax bracket, that's when I would consider going to your RRSP. Put money into your RRSP while you're at a higher tax bracket, get that tax return, and then later on, once you've paid off your house, you've retired, the kids have moved out, and you just start sipping from that RRSP account after it's grown, you'll be paying taxes, but you'll be paying them at a lower tax bracket. And that's the whole idea of an RRSP. So if you think about the demonstration that I just did, if you do plan on withdrawing a whole chunk of money out later, again, maximize that TFSA. Because if you take out a whole chunk of money in 1 year out of your RRSP, you're gonna be paying a lot of tax on that money that year. So to summarize, if you're young, look at your TFSAs first, then your RRSPs and other investment vehicles. If you're a bit older, maybe look at your RRSPs a little more closely and then your TFSAs and other investment vehicles after that. Of course, you could also look at your mortgage and paying that down as another place to put your money, as saving on the interest is just as good as gaining that interest in an investment later on. One last note about all of these accounts is that if you withdraw money from these accounts, you don't get the contribution room back. So in a TFSA or RRSP, let's say 1 year you withdraw $3,000, that doesn't mean you now have $9,000 of contribution room. Once you withdraw money for that year, it's done. So just keep that in mind if you ever withdraw money from any of these accounts. Anyways, guys, if you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. Tune in next time because I'm going to talk about how I cleaned up all my bank accounts and investments and the journey that I've been on this year trying to get all of my money streamlined. And until next time, my name is Sean, wishing you a great day and an even better tomorrow. Have a good one, guys. See ya.